Thank you, Natasha. As a bitterly cold and wet night descends on Newcastle, many are hoping that tonight will be the Pasha Bolka's last on Nobby's beach. The effort to refloat her started earlier today with the pumping out of seawater from the ship's hold and the pumping in of compressed air to make the ship lighter. 6 large steel cables are now attached to the ship, 3 of those to tugboats and 3 of those to large sea anchors. All will be used to try and pull her off the sand. There's a 2 to 3 metre swell running tonight and a strong westerly wind which will actually help in the salvage operation. NBN News reporter Jess Phyllis has more.
The attempt to refloat the 40,000-tonne bulk carrier began around midday with the steady release of seawater ballast which had been used to keep her steady. Mother Nature has played ball for the most part, with no rain, winds gusting up to 25 knots and a swell of 3 metres. A 6th line has been attached to the Pacific Responder. 2 others are connected to tugboats which have been gently motoring out to sea since this afternoon. Another 3 are sitting on the ocean floor. The idea? To start pulling bow first as the tide came in. But those behind the operation to move the Pasha were making no promises.
It is a tricky situation. There are real risks attached to it. It may take a couple of tides and there are no guarantees in this operation.
Salvage crews acknowledge there is the very real threat of an environmental catastrophe during this operation. However, response teams are set up down on the beach in case the unthinkable, an oil spill, does occur.
Obviously, that is our biggest concern.
The other worry, public safety. An exclusion zone was set up with Newcastle's entire East End locked down.
Unfortunately, we've disappointed the public in some sense that they aren't able to actually see this, but the setback is necessary because if a cable was to snap, the public would be at risk.
Still, crowds made their way to any possible vantage point for what could be one last look at Newcastle's latest tourist attraction.
We thought, well, it might be the last day to see it because it might be moving it off.
Just come up from Yamada Beach to have a look. I think it'll be an awesome sight to see.
But not everyone's convinced she's going to budge.
Well, I mean, they have to have a go, but I don't think it'll succeed.
I'd be putting my money on it'll be there still this time tomorrow.
What about this time next week?
Well, I think they'll have the oxy torches out by then.
Jessica Phyllis, NBN News.
It was flood-damaged cars almost as far as the eye could see. The lure of snapping up one of these 600 vehicles for next to nothing attracted thousands of buyers from all over Australia and overseas. This 2006 Audi A3 was the first car to go for the tidy sum of $24,500. Its buyer thrilled with the price tag.
Probably for my wife to drive for a little while, then once it's cleaned up, then I'll move it on.
The auction was a case of buyer beware, with all cars sold under the Written Off Vehicles Act, unregistered and with no promises of roadworthiness.
We want people to know that they are buying flood-affected cars that have significant problems with them.
The cars will have their flood-damaged history attached to their permanent records to protect future buyers. And just what sort of people were bidding today?
It's a real eclectic mixture of buyers. We've got motorcar traders, dismantlers, panel repair people, and the odd private person that's pretty handy with a spanner and a screwdriver.
And anyone who missed out on the auction action today will have another chance to grab a bargain tomorrow, when this lot of more than 1,000 flood-affected vehicles goes under the hammer. Madeline Bond, NBN News.
There are hundreds of homes around the Hunter needing urgent repairs, while others will be knocked down and rebuilt. Insurers say their priority is to get people back into their homes as soon as possible. So many have brought in their preferred builders and tradesmen from as far as Western Australia. But that's left local builders seeing red.
I think it makes economic sense that the money in our own community is redistributed rather than going off to other states. I just can't see that making economic sense that we bring people in, accommodation, transport costs. I can't see how their work would be any cheaper than local builders and tradespeople.
Some insurers are allowing people to find their own builders. Those people are asked to contact the Master Builders Association, which has a list of licensed and available locals.
Yeah, we're very concerned that there are a number of local builders, over 170 builders and tradespeople, put their name forward to help immediately with the recovery, and they're not being used. We know that only 4 or 5 of those are getting work at the moment.
But it must be said that most of the rebuilding work hasn't begun, and when it does, it'll take 6 to 9 months. So it's hoped local builders will be contacted as soon as claims are approved and assessments are completed. Jane Goldsmith, NBN News. We may be shivering in the Hunter, but spare a thought for those in the chilly New England region. Winter in the town of Walker takes on a whole new meaning, with farmland blanketed by snow as temperatures dropped to an icy sub-zero overnight. Heavy snowfalls were also recorded at Armidale and at Hanging Rock near Nundle, with temperatures dropping 10 degrees below average for this time of year. And while it's a great relief to see the sun peeping through after weeks of rainfall, Newcastle dipped to a cool 7 degrees this morning, a complex low-pressure system across the southeast of the country responsible. The chilly storm force winds reaching up to 40 knots continue to batter the Hunter, making conditions even colder. After enjoying temperatures consistently above average, we're now certainly feeling the cold, with a reported spike in influenza cases, and elderly people are asked to stay rugged up at home. The coastline is still uninviting and tainted by the storm runoff, but it's not all bad. A break in the wet and wild weather has provided the perfect antidote for surfers suffering cabin fever. Jane Goldsmith, NBN News.
Righto, accelerator up. Right, what's wrong with it?
That's easy. It won't start. But a mechanic's job is to fix the engine too, and that's why these apprentices are at TAFE, to understand all sorts of problems from the complex.
Your CO2 will play up, it's leaning out, the hydrocarbons all go up.
To the basic.
What's wrong with those?
They're running the wrong way.
Just fix them up.
Seeing the problem is one thing, but most of the time you'll hear it first. So where does that leave Daniel Forbes, who's deaf?
I will ask for help, and just to see what's doing, and ask for help to see what the noise is making. I want to work with cars, and that's what I want to do for my life.
When Daniel finishes high school and starts his trade, computers will help him out. For now, though, he hears the world through support worker Margaret Goodsall.
I've been to just about every TAFE class there is, mechanics, welding, building buses and trucks and all sorts of things. So I do learn a lot. And I actually taught my husband how to weld.
Over at the motorcycle workshop, a new mechanics course is underway after pressure from the industry, and again it stemmed from a skills shortage.
I made a deal with most of the motorcycle shops that if they helped to resource this, or led me to where I could resource it, then we would have a serious look at running the full motorcycle trade. Now that's happened through IAG.
The insurance company hands the machines, which are write-offs, over to TAFE. After 12 months, the apprentices give them back in better condition to be sold at auction, a unique scheme other TAFE institutes are now considering.
Until motorcycles came into being, light vehicle motor mechanics was the most popular. Now a lot of the light vehicle motor mechanics are really jealous of these guys because they're working on some really flash machinery.
Apprentice Chris Walker doesn't own a motorcycle. He doesn't even have a licence to ride one. Yet, a change in career was enough to bring about the new interest.
The job came first. I was being a detailer at first, just washing bikes and putting bikes together. I'm still doing that now, but now, obviously, with the apprenticeship, I'm learning more about the mechanical side of things as well.
Unlike the motorcycles, the cars out of panel beating can't be sold on, so after they've beat and sprayed the panels, they make additions. The stretch Nissan Bluebird is unique, yet pretty much every workshop will have one of these. In the early 1990s, Daihatsu donated 200 vehicles to TAFE campuses across the country after they suffered saltwater damage while being shipped in. Most of the cars are donated. If not, TAFE buys them dirt cheap, with more emphasis on engines and less on textbooks.
We have to show that the guy can do it in real life, not just in a technical college. So more and more we're driving towards work-based learning.
Enter the trade school model, with Glendale among the first in New South Wales to offer the program.
So they're continuing to do their normal school studies with a vocational component, and they're actually a part-time trainee at the same time. They're paid for doing that part-time trainee activity and will continue through to year 12.
Tomorrow night, we taste test TAFE's commercial cookery course. Adam McDougall has been a regular for the Knights since splitting with Souths last season, and the only game he's missed this year was against the Rabbitohs in round 5. In Newcastle for 7 years before his move to Sydney, the 32-year-old's return means he'll play his 100th game for the Knights. On the same evening, he'll come up against his former teammates at the Bunnies for the first time.
It's definitely going to be a lot more fun playing against a lot of my mates, and you know, a lot of guys there I know, and you know, it's always good to go out and make a good account of yourself against your friends.
But it's talk of family fueling speculation that younger brother Ben could make a return to the NRL after stints with Newcastle and Manly earlier in his career. And with little brother Luke already at the Knights, it'd be a backline dominated by McDougall's.
It'd definitely be you know, great for myself. It's always easier playing with your brother because you seem to have a good understanding with each other. But yeah, it would be interesting, and you know, it'd be a great coup for the club.
Nursing a corked knee, Chris Bailey's no guarantee of playing tomorrow night, while Brad Tighe's shoulder is likely to rule him out. Daniel Abraham's been named in the starting 13, set to make his return from injury, while new Parramatta signing Zeb Taylor is in the squad as well. The back rower on standby should a spot become available.
If Brian needs me, I'm ready to go. I've been ready for the last 4 or 5 weeks, so I'm sweet.
And Knights officials have confirmed they'll be keeping an eye on Carl Johnson, but haven't made any commitments. The outside back will play with Wests in the Newcastle competition, signed from the North Queensland Cowboys. Adam McIlwright, NBN News.
Good evening, Paul Lobb with you from Fort Scratchley tonight, overlooking Nobby's Beach, where the first attempt to refloat the stricken Pasha Bulker is underway. The effort is in full swing now. It's been going since this afternoon. 6 large cables are attached to the ship, 3 of those to tugboats, 3 to large sea anchors. The ballast water has been pumped out this afternoon and compressed air is being pumped in. The effort should reach its peak around 10 to 7 tonight on the peak of the evening high tide. Now, if all goes to plan, the ship should float away and be freed tonight. The major concern is a possible oil spill, and there's a crack environmental team on standby should that happen. The east end of Newcastle is pretty much sealed off tonight to vehicles and also to pedestrians, and that's caused some major frustration. But the police say it's all for public safety. So the first attempt to refloat the ship is underway, and we'll have full details for you in NBN's Hour of News tonight at 6 o'clock. Now, there has been a setback tonight with the snapping of one of the big steel cables, which is being used to try and pull the ship out to sea off its sandy resting place. Now, that hasn't helped. Also, it's been a game of inches tonight. Every time one of the big tugs was able to pull the bow around and move it slightly from its sandy position, the swell came back in and pushed it back onto the sand. So, given that setback, it doesn't look as if the Pasha Bulker will be leaving Nobby's Beach tonight, but it has moved slightly. There's been a movement of several metres, so it really has been a Herculean effort tonight by the salvage crew to do what they've done. Well, thanks, Ray. There was a setback for the salvage team tonight when one of the steel cables being used to try and pull the ship off the beach actually snapped. They did manage to get the bow of the ship floating on tonight's high tide around 7 o'clock, but the heaviest stern section remains stuck in the sand. The constant wave and swell action hasn't helped either. For each metre the tugs managed to pull the bow around, the sea has pushed it back. Now, further attempts to refloat the ship are expected in the coming days, with the high tides to peak around Saturday night at 1.8 metres. So it seems for tonight at least we won't be kissing goodbye to the Pasha Bulker.
Good afternoon, everyone. Our weather watch today, we're overlooking Nobby's Beach and hopefully witnessing the refloating of the Pasha Bulker. Conditions in Newcastle today have been ideal weather-wise, and despite some fresh westerly winds, that offshore breeze should only help with the refloating of the vessel. I know they're waiting for the peak of the high tide, which is due in at around 10 to 7 this evening at 1.7 metres. We have a deep low pressure system off the south coast of the state, and that's been generating a large southerly swell. Fortunately, here at Nobby's, it is sheltered from that swell a little, but that should only assist with that tidal surge and hopefully the refloating of the vessel later this evening. Of course, we'll keep you up to date with all the action right here on NBN well and truly into this evening, and I'll bring you all your local weather details, including your local temperatures and weekend forecasts coming up in tonight's news.
We have about 3 daylight hours left today. It requires about 5 daylight hours to connect both the Kira and the Pacific Responder. Therefore, we support the decision to connect the Pacific Responder, the Super Tug, tomorrow during the daylight hours.
Maria and Ettore Francini have spent the past week waiting for their flood-damaged possessions to be taken away. The news Newcastle City Council ceased its free bulk waste collections yesterday has come as quite a shock.
I don't know what to say. Just I'm very, very upset about it because they don't do the right thing.
While some of their neighbours' rubbish has been collected, the Francinis say their household items have simply been left to rot.
I let to stay in here years and years. It's not my problem.
And the Francinis' case is hardly an isolated one, with numerous streets in Hamilton alone still littered with furniture and other items. The Lord Mayor says he was unaware there was any rubbish left to collect.
But if there are people that are still stuck with material out in front of their house and it is water damage, well then I'd like to know about it and we'll see if we can do something about it.
Madeline Bond, NBN News. This year's Reserve Forces Day parade marked the 90th anniversary of the World War I Battle of Beersheba, one of the last great charges of the Light Horse Brigade. The parade salute was taken by Victoria Cross winners, Australia's Keith Payne and Britain's Johnson Bahari, who both received the medal for saving their colleagues' lives during wars in Vietnam and Iraq.
It's an honour to be here. I mean, I'm along great men who do great things, so people like me could reap the benefit and pass it on, carry it on.
Meanwhile, the heroic efforts of the Hunters Emergency Service workers during the long weekend storms were recognised last night, ahead of the match between the Newcastle Knights and the South Sydney Rabbitohs. SES workers, the New South Wales and Rural Fire Brigades, Red Cross and Coastal Patrol all received a standing ovation as they did a lap of honour.
On a bitterly cold Newcastle night, Mitchell Sargent didn't warm to South Sydney's David Fayalogo. And while Adam McDougall tried his hand at acting, Michael Young played a supporting role in Corey Patterson's conversion. On the eve of his 29th birthday, George Carmont crossed, gifted a pass from the big back rower who kicked another from the sideline to make it 12-all.
Once we got going, we were dominant.
Enter Cooper Vuna and things really got moving. This was quick too. The intercept changed the tempo and Newcastle simply lost its groove.
It was on the back of some tough calls and some errors that reek of inexperience.
The club's in good shape for years to come. It's just trying to learn really quick at the moment and cut out some of those little mistakes that leads to tries.
Corey Patterson injured his shoulder, while Jared Mullen copped a knock to his jaw, but both are expected to play Parramatta next Monday.
It's the news we had all feared. The stranded Pasha has started leaking oil.
The air surveillance indicates traces of oil that have come from the ship. It's been described to me as about a micron thick. That's 0.0001 millimetre.
The slick stretches across 75 metres of water in a northeasterly direction away from Nobby's Beach and was first detected at about 1 o'clock this afternoon. The minister today wasn't offering any excuses.
We had always said that oil and the risk of oil leaking is real.
While he was quick to say the leak has now stopped, salvage crews have no idea where it originated from or its cause.
They say that it's close to the stern, or it came from close to the stern, but we don't know whether it came from the stern.
An oil response vessel, the Shirley Smith, has been dispatched. Air surveillance is continuing and a ground crew of about 60 men are now monitoring the situation. Despite the leak and possible complications it could cause in the ship's salvage attempt tonight, the minister says the second refloat effort will go ahead as scheduled just before 9 o'clock.
The operation is continuing. Preparation is right on track. There's good enthusiasm coming from the salvage team.
So far, the salvage effort has cost about $4.2 million. That's expected to be passed on to the Japanese owners.
We're going to be plan to put all our costs back to the owner.
Madeline Bond, NBN News. Exhibitions like this could become few and far between at the Newcastle Region Art Gallery if councillors stick to their decision to cut $200,000 from the gallery's $1.6 million budget.
That could affect the educational program that the art gallery has, which affects young children. It affects the opportunity for people to go in there and learn about art, and really affects the work that volunteers can do.
Councillors approved the budget amendment, along with the $100,000 cut from the Regional Museum at their meeting last week. The main reason for the about-face was that the museum's loss would allow the council's community assistance program to remain, which helps fund one-off events like the Newcastle Film Festival. And the cut to the art gallery funding will mean people won't be charged a proposed fee at Blackbutt Reserve. But the Lord Mayor isn't impressed.
To take this amount of money out of the budget without any warning, I think is deplorable.
He'll be asking councillors to change their minds at the next council meeting in his Lord Mayoral Minute. The gallery's volunteers say if councillors don't reverse their decision, they can't expect them to keep up their fundraising efforts.
I think you'd find that people wouldn't be as committed and wouldn't be as interested.
Madeline Bond, NBN News.
It was a battle of the birds at Belmont, and the Magpies found form early with Glenn Payton pulling off a 60-metre run to put the visitors on the board. The Seagulls' first try came through Todd Madison, and after some entertaining football, the hosts were ahead by 6 when fullback Tom Ryan scored his first. Both teams fumbled opportunities until Kane Matthias found a hole and dug Raymond Terrace out of one. At 12 all, it was hard enough, but Seagulls winger Jason McKenzie really copped it. Lakes was then penalised and the Magpies could have taken the kick. It was a good thing they didn't. It wouldn't be enough though, as the Seagulls showed why they're leading the league, winning by 16. Hunter just couldn't match the Kestrels last week, with the Melbourne side leading at every quarter. The Jaggers' Alex Harding, though, was a standout and has made sure the goal shooter's spot is fiercely fought for.
There's always a competition at training and there's always competition at match day, but it's healthy. I think it's great because it makes you work that little bit extra.
And it's worked all season for Karen Bailey, who enjoys an 87% strike rate, among the highest in the league.
I think personally I'm doing all right this season, and hopefully the selectors will see that and I'll get picked up next year.
That's when the Jaggers and Swifts become one team to form part of the new Trans-Tasman competition. The year just keeps getting better for Newcastle striker Kate Gill. Along with Sydney Sarah Walsh, the Matildas pair are among 5 finalists for the Asian Football Confederation's Women's Player of the Year award. It should come as no surprise for Gill, having scored a staggering 13 goals during 3 of the Olympic qualifiers. In NBN soccer, ladder leader Lake Macquarie hosts the second-placed Edgeworth on Sunday, while the Waratahs will have a go at ending Merryweather's unbeaten run in Newcastle and Hunter rugby.
Despite evidence of an oil leak, the salvage team came close to refloating the Pasha Bulka last night, with the bow swinging around to the east, ready to head out to sea. And with the progress made last night, plus these favourable conditions, plus a 1.9 metre high tide, it's hoped that tonight might prove to be third time lucky.
Just 50 metres separates the Pasha Bulka from deep water, and the salvage team is confident tonight's the night. And they have good reason to be hopeful, with a 1.9 metre high tide just after 9:30.
Conditions do look promising, are favourable, and we'll leave it to the salvage master.
The salvage operation continued today, with the tugs repositioning themselves ahead of tonight's third attempt. The Ports Minister played down the oil spill, saying there's no indication of oil on nearby beaches, but the westerly winds may have pushed the oil out to sea.
It appears to be lube oil that's come out of the propeller shaft as a consequence of the turning action that has occurred as part of the salvage operation.
At about 9 o'clock last night, Minister Tripodi broke the news we were all dreading.
The bad news is that oil has been identified on both sides of the ship. The oil response team have been activated. They're in full swing, putting into place the measures necessary to mitigate it.
While those on shore searched for evidence of the oil by scouring the beach, these pictures clearly show the lube oil on either side of the Pasha Bulka. Many raised concerns about a possible oil spill and demanded more be done to avert it, but still there were no regrets from the salvage team about not pumping the oil off the ship.
We believe that every measure to date has been an intelligent, well-informed move based on lots of experience.
And while the second salvage attempt last night was overshadowed by the oil leak after the ship's rudder broke, this time-lapse image shows the salvage team made great headway, the tugs pulling as hard as they could to free the Pasha.
The stern is still the pivot point of the ship. The bow has swung all the way around except for a few degrees short on what is necessary. Progress is very good.
And these aerial pictures also show the substantial movement. At the beginning of the night, the Pasha was parallel to the beach, but within a couple of hours it had swung around to point out to sea. And while the 40,000-tonne ship didn't refloat, the salvage crew members certainly have given themselves a great head start for tonight. Jane Goldsmith, NBN News.
Cigarette smoke wasn't the only thing missing from many of the Hunters' licensed venues. There was also a distinct lack of patrons, particularly in gaming areas. But with the state government's ban on indoor smoking in pubs and clubs coming into force today, a loss of business has been expected.
We have actually factored a slight drop in our revenue, but hopefully on the positive side, we might also see the return of people who have not come to clubs because of the smoke.
Some licensees fear the smoke-free laws could result in a permanent shift in smokers' drinking patterns.
I do think you will see more that will drink at home.
But with 82% of adults now non-smokers, most agree it's for the greater good.
For the first time in over 100 years of history with registered clubs, we will have clean air, so it is a huge cultural change.
That doesn't mean smokers' needs have been forgotten, with registered clubs across New South Wales spending a combined $400 million renovating premises to provide outdoor smoking areas. Patrons' response to the regulations has been mixed.
I think it's wrong in a way, but it don't affect me though.
Oh, I think they're pretty good.
Madeline Bond, NBN News.
It seems the difference between buying your groceries from one major supermarket to another can be about $30 per shop. Choice magazine studied 38 Coles, Woolworths and IGA stores and found that the cheapest is the Coles supermarket in Belmont, where a basket of 33 items cost $95. The most expensive, an IGA store in Dubbo West, where the same items would set you back $121. But the investigation also proved that it pays to shop around for specials.
Coles had about 10 of our items on sale, whereas Woolworths only had about 1 or 2. This meant that Coles was 7.7% cheaper than Woolworths on average.
Aldi supermarkets weren't included in the Choice investigation as they don't have the same brands as the other major stores, but the equivalent basket of goods would have cost just $55. Among the cheapest major supermarkets surveyed in New South Wales was Coles at the Junction in Newcastle, which rated number 4. Which begs the question, why can one Coles store offer prices slightly cheaper than others? Coles says they try to be consistent across all supermarkets, but admit prices can vary depending on local competitors. Jane Goldsmith, NBN News.
Having done the rounds in Europe and the UK, Adam Griffiths has completed football's full circle in coming back to Newcastle, joining twin brother Joel.
Just because he's a good player, and it seems that the team was doing really well with Gary in charge, and it's definitely a big part of my decision to come back.
The pair played together for the old Newcastle United, and for Adam, joining the Jets represents a change in culture and a welcome one too, compared with the former NSL days.
The goalkeeper coach was the masseur, and the physio wasn't there, so yeah, definitely a huge upgrade in the staff.
Along with Noel Spencer, the pair should give Newcastle a significant leg up, with the former Mariner and one-time Sydney FC player to take his spot in the Jets midfield.
It's a position that I like, and I like to work hard and get stuck in, and try and get on the end of a few goals as well.
Both new signings will ease into their respective roles, having just started training, and 3 trial matches are scheduled this week, with a trio of visiting footballers from the UK playing for their future in Newcastle.
Well, we'll have to have a look at what they're like, obviously, and see what sort of talent they've got, but they come with some pedigree. They've played in the lower leagues in England.
Adam McIlrick, NBN News. He's known as the Fijian Flyer, and given Aku Uati's form in Newcastle's lower grades, he was always on course for bigger things. State selectors thought so too, with the former national schoolboy and Central Coast League player turned Knight named in the Blues residence side.
It means heaps to me. Playing for New South Wales is really big. It's a really big thing, and I can't wait. And I know it's going to be good on Wednesday night.
He'll be joined by former Western Suburbs Rosella and Mr Tonga, Sion Finifuaki.
Finifuaki, he's got the ball and gets to halfway.
The bodybuilder turned blockbuster forward made his debut off the bench for the Sea Eagles in their loss to the Dragons yesterday and pretty much went straight into camp with the residents.
Certainly an honour to coach elite rugby league players, and certainly a great stage for them to display their skills up at Suncorp.
Knights fullback Nathan Hinton was originally listed in the 17-man squad but later withdrew to concentrate on club commitments.
It was basically Brian Smith's decision that keep him fresh in case Kurt Gidley gets wounded in Wednesday's night, and he's playing great football at the moment.
Zeb Taylor was named in the residents team before signing with Newcastle but opted out to make the Knights his priority. Coincidentally, he made his top grade debut in the red and blue jumper on Friday night. Adam McKilrick, NBN News.
The departure of the Pasha Bulker attracted as much public and media interest as its arrival. Nobby's Beach was today calm as a mill pond, leaving many wondering just how the vessel had ever washed ashore.
It's gone. Yeah, the sea's flat, and I came all the way from Honeysuckle and thought I could see it on the way, and it wasn't here, so I'm surprised. I'm stunned. I didn't think they'd get it off.
I think I was like most of people that they thought that it was going to stay there for a while.
Much to the delight of residents, the Pasha's departure signalled an end to the exclusion zone, which has caused traffic gridlock in the city's East End.
We had to plan to go out or not go out because we couldn't get back in.
While the Pasha Bulker has finally been removed, Nobby's Beach will remain closed until divers can remove chains and sea anchors used in the salvage operation from the ocean floor.
But lifeguards were today happy regardless.
It's a great feeling to come to work and not have a boat on the middle of your beach.
The Pasha's stormy visit has been transferred onto canvas by artist Bill Dodds in a painting titled Red Friday.
This is a painting that I've been looking to paint my whole life. History in the making, literally.
But if this priceless artwork is out of your price range, perhaps at $10 each, one of these Bulker beer holders is a more affordable souvenir. Christy Carter, NBN News. The water has receded, the clean-up job is almost done, and now the assessors and builders have moved in with 58,000 claims already lodged by Hunter and Central Coast residents. Local builders and those called in to help are tallying quotes for those affected, many saying the rebuild job will continue for many months, even years. At Wallsend, the real work is well underway to reopen the worst affected businesses as quickly as possible. Most of the shops are operating and welcoming back much-needed customers with open arms.
We are reopened, we are ready for business, and please do come and support us because it's really important for the local economy and also the people who are employed in the businesses as well.
A Wallsend task force has been established with 60 people meeting last night. The aim to combat a downturn in business since the flood. They're also attempting to develop an early warning detection system for flooding in Wallsend.
Work out how we can actually let people in Wallsend town know if something like this is going to happen again.
After a hectic few weeks, the 4 disaster recovery centres are somewhat quieter and have scaled back their opening hours.
The numbers of people needing to drop in have dropped back, and we're moving from the immediate crisis to now helping people get their lives back on track.
More than 3,000 people have sought help to rebuild their lives, with dozens of government and welfare agencies providing advice and financial assistance. Jane Goldsmith, NBN News.
If the government's serious about tackling climate change, they should announce a moratorium on new coal mines and not approve massive coal mines like Anvil Hill.
What looks like a giant mound of trash is actually an environmentally friendly gold mine. The Hunter Resource Recovery Centre, which is owned by Cessnock, Lake Macquarie and Maitland City Councils, has been processing recyclable garbage since 1997. When it first opened, 23% of the material deposited here was garbage. Today, that figure is down to just 1.2%.
At the same time, the volume of material coming through has almost doubled. So local residents in Cessnock, Lake Macquarie and Maitland are amongst the world's best recyclers.
To date, the centre has saved 588,105 cubic metres of landfill and recycled enough paper to save 2.77 million trees. So far, the centre has sold 213,410 tonnes of recyclable products throughout Australia and Asia, with countries like China buying our discarded plastics to make everything from televisions to toys and even rayon clothing. And the money the centre makes is returned to ratepayers.
We're subsidising each household by roughly $1.45 to $1.47 per year. Doesn't sound like much, but we're currently providing 112,550 services on a fortnightly basis, so it quickly adds up.
With 10 days between the clash with the Bunnies and Monday night's game against the Eels, Knights staff have had plenty of time to provide personal attention. A massive injury toll has also kept several players off the training paddock. Brad Tye, Adam Woolnough, Corey Patterson, Chris Bailey and Josh Perry will all be subject to a fitness test before earning a place in the 17 to face Parramatta. With 3 Knights also backing up from Origin, coach Brian Smith will again be forced to play the waiting game with player availability.
I think we've got the makings of a very competitive team. Hopefully we get them all to pick from.
While he's happy with the recovery time for his players, Smith was again critical about the allocation of Monday night games for the Newcastle club.
I'm actually a big fan of Monday night football. I just think it should be shared around.
The former Eels coach says he's not looking to settle any scores with Parramatta, just looking forward to catching up with some old friends.
There'll be a little bit of time for that, but it's just another opportunity for us to get ourselves back up that ladder again.
Meanwhile, it's now likely centre George Carmont will stay with Newcastle until the end of the season. Carmont had been linked with an overseas club, but the deal has reportedly fallen through. Mitchell Hughes, NBN News. It was organised mayhem at the Broadmeadows Stadium as hundreds of kids enjoyed some school holiday court time. Passing on some expert advice after a successful 4-year college career in the US, 22-year-old Sarah Davidson is now weighing up her options before deciding whether to have a shot at the WNBL.
At the moment I'm enjoying the break from basketball because 4 years of college is pretty intense, but I definitely do miss it and am looking forward to playing again.
Fellow Hunter product Shemaine Gordon also had a promising stint in the US before returning to Australia. After getting a taste of the WNBL with Sydney last year, a career in the police force could now limit her options.
Hopefully I'll be accepted and going in September, which would mean no more basketball at that level, but I'll just have to see, what intake I get in to determine what I do.
To netball, and Jaegers coach John Fletcher has nominated for a coaching role with the New South Wales franchise in the new Trans-Tasman League.
If I have to move to Sydney, if an opportunity came down there, well, we'd have to look at it as it came, but I'm actually still very keen to do some work in this area.
Fletcher believes several Jaegers could feature in the 12-member team.
Some of the younger ones that may be a year or two in the waiting, so we're hoping a second division or a second tier National League will start, so some of those girls can still develop.
Mitchell Hughes, NBN News.
Most people were hoping that last night's attempt to refloat the ship would be third time lucky for the salvage crew. With the bow pointing out to sea, the aim was to dislodge the heavy stern section of the ship, which was stuck on Nobby's reef. The crew pumped seawater into the bow section to try and lift the stern, and all the while the 3 tugs pulled with all their might, churning up the water with heavy thrust. Then, on the peak of the high tide, just after 9:30 and almost as if on cue, the salvage master gave the word that the Pasha was about to move. On shore, the Ports Minister was giving a press conference saying progress was slow when the ship moved off behind him, to the delight of the gathered media. Within minutes, the Pasha was dragged clear of the beach and well out to sea. As the tugs controlled her path, cables to the sea anchors were oxy-cut free in a shower of sparks. Onlookers who'd gathered at limited vantage points were delighted to witness history in the making. As the distance grew between the ship and Newcastle's glittering skyline, it was sinking in that what many believed impossible had been achieved.
I couldn't believe it, to be honest, but, but I just got to say, look, yeah, we're very happy with the result.
We've got a very good result without any collateral damage, and we can be very pleased about that.
I want to thank in particular the people of Newcastle for their patience, for their cooperation.
As the ship with its bent propeller and snapped-off rudder was towed 30 kilometres offshore, environmental crews searched the beach for oil but found none. Today, divers went under the ship to assess the damage, and the Svitzer company says she is taking water through a crack in the hull.
What water does come in is being controlled by air compression and by pumps. We have got control of the condition of the ship, and we're comfortable with that.
A decision will be made soon on whether to bring the ship into Newcastle Harbour or tow her straight to the dockyard, capable of slipping her in Brisbane. Paul Lobb, NBN News.